Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar about the NERIS transition and how ImageTrend is here to help you navigate to NERIS one step at a time. I'm Angel Fisher with ImageTrend, and we are thrilled to be hosting today's webinar. Before I introduce our presenters, I'd like to take a moment to go over some quick housekeeping information. First, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand. You will receive a link to the recording within the next few days. Secondly, in looking at your dashboard, you'll see that you can adjust each window to suit your preferences by hovering over the widget and selecting the appropriate action. I do want to call attention to the widget titled Questions, which we encourage you to utilize to ask questions throughout the presentation. We will try to answer as many of these questions as possible throughout and at the end of the presentation. If we are not able to answer your question, we will respond via email after the webinar. Now I am honored to present today's speakers. Troy Lachinsky has a wealth of experience in both product management and emergency services. With more than 27 years in software product management, particularly at ImageTrend, Troy has a deep understanding of the needs of EMS and fire departments, both from a technical and operational perspective. He has also served as a paid on-call member of the East Bethel, Minnesota Fire Department since 2005. As the product manager for the Elite Fire at ImageTrend, Troy is ensuring that the transition from NFIRS to NERIS is as smooth as possible. This is a very significant task given the complexity of transitioning critical reporting systems for all fire departments. Tammy Mills joined ImageTrend as an implementation specialist in August 2021. Before joining ImageTrend, Tammy spent 14 years with the Mississippi State Fire Marshal's Office. During her time there, Tammy received certification as a fire and emergency services instructor level 1, 2, and 3, was the administrator for the statewide fire records management system, and wrote 6 successful Department of Homeland Security grants. Troy and Tammy, thank you for presenting today, and the floor is yours.
Well, thanks, Angel. Welcome, everyone, to today's session. We're going to talk about where ImageTrend is at with NERIS. I know that many of you probably sat in on the NERIS webinar yesterday, and you'll see some of the same slides today, which just shows the partnership that ImageTrend has with the NERIS team. And we're making sure that we are messaging out the same message to the community. So here's the agenda for today. What is NERIS? Why NERIS? What is the NERIS timeline? How ImageTrend will help you. We'll have a sneak preview of the NERIS run form and the user experience, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So what is NERIS? I know that many of you on the call already have heard quite a bit about what NERIS is, but NERIS, which is the National Emergency Response Information System, will replace NFIRS as the National Fire Incident Reporting System at the end of this year. NFIRS has been around for a very long time, since the 70s, and there hasn't been any major updates in almost 2 decades. So it is definitely time for a new system, and we are very excited to be part of this. So why is this happening? So the NFIRS server will be decommissioned at the end of this year, December 31st, 2025. That server will be decommissioned and will no longer be able to send incident data to the NFIRS server. There's a couple of big reasons why the NFIRS system needs to be replaced. So a couple of them that I'd like to point out, and the things that really get me excited about NERIS. So number one, we're not able to send the data to the NFIRS system automatically. So that is the thing I'm most excited about, that we'll be able to automatically send incident data to NERIS via API. And just the fact that we'll be sending that data automatically, in my opinion, will have agencies sending that data on a more timely manner. So currently, NFIRS is not requiring departments to send the data until July 1st of the following year. So in some cases, the data that is at NFIRS is 1.5 years old, which really doesn't allow us to look at that data and make data-driven decisions that are timely. So as we see emerging hazards being introduced into our communities that affect property, our citizens, and our providers, we're not able to take action in a quick manner. So that is a thing that gets me very excited about this transition. So in addition, NFIRS doesn't allow any interoperability. So that is also something that NERIS will have. We all know that if a fire occurred on January 30th, 2022, we can go find the weather data for that, but why should we have to look it up if that data already exists in other places? So NERIS in the future is promising a world of interoperability where data that lives somewhere in a different database will be accessible and will all be able to be combined in one source. This slide right here, I'm presenting it slightly different than the folks at NERIS. I think that this is why a lot of folks have they're concerned about NERIS, because this is all they see today. It's just the tip of the iceberg. We're talking about a big change in our industry, but there's currently nothing that you can see, touch, or feel. So it's giving people some heartburn. So, below the surface, the special sauce that makes NERIS special is the analytics, the API, the data schemas, and the system architecture. Those are the things that will really make this a wholesale change from what we've had with NFIRS. This is not just NFIRS version 6.0. This is a complete new experience, and it will be a complete new and better data-driven world for all of us in the fire industry. So let's talk a little bit about the NERIS onboarding process. So in order to get transitioned, step number one is your agency must be onboarded by NERIS. So what is that process? So first of all, there will be identification of an initial entry administrator. So we'll have to choose somebody at each agency to do that. Authorization confirmations required from the chief or equivalent for the admin. And then identify if that entity is submitting incidents through NERIS, direct web application, or a third-party compatible system. The folks that are on this call, I'm assuming will all be using an RMS system and will be using a system like ImageTrend to submit their data. So onboarding is a two-phase process. So step number one, fire departments will have the opportunity to add the attributes and that information, and they will be establishing their node in NERIS. So this will be the entity information, which we'll talk about a bit more later, but it is information about your agency, is where your stations are, where your headquarters is, what kind of vehicles you have and what their capabilities are, and what kind of staffing you have, full-time people, paid on-call people, volunteer people, and how many. So that information will need to be collected at some point, and it will need to be entered into NERIS when you create your node in the initial onboarding phase. Phase number two will be reporting. And in most cases, onboarding phase one and phase two will take place maybe a little bit, not consecutively. The phase one part will be easy to set up your node and enter your information. And then phase two will be transitioning the data submission part when the RMS vendor, ImageTrend, is ready to do so, and you as an agency are ready to do so. So this is the NERIS onboarding ramp up for 2025. You can see it's pretty aggressive as we reach into the fourth quarter, as we are looking to get all of the agencies onboarded, because we are looking to have a complete transition as of January 1st, 2026. You can see that NERIS is really looking to do this in a logical fashion. They already have onboarded the 165 departments last year. And in February of this year, they'll be onboarding an additional 500, and then 1,500 in the summer, 5,000 at the end of the year, and 10,000 by the end of 2025. So this next slide shows a little bit about how they're thinking about how this goes. So the early adopters have already happened. There was just a meeting just a few weeks ago with all the state fire marshals to get them up and ready for the NERIS transition. And then they're looking at fire departments with less than a 5,000 population, and then metro fire departments. And then we'll be looking at the FEMA regions, and they'll be working more closely with the RMS partners. Now, with that said, NERIS has been a good partner, and we have been working with them very closely over the last several months. This is the NERIS regional rollout schedule. So if you want to get an idea on when your department will be onboarded, this is the map you should look at. So if you find your state and find which FEMA region you are in, this is the schedule that your department would be onboarded onto NERIS. So that again is the initial stage where you'll enter your entity information into the NERIS and create your NERIS node. And then you'll follow up with ImageTrend, and we will start submitting your data when you are ready to go and do that. All right, so this again is the NERIS timeline, what they've done so far. So in 2024, they released the beta schemas. They got some departments up and running. They froze the beta schemas on November 4th of 2024. They'll be doing onboarding throughout this year, and this will be a hybrid reporting year. So FEMA is fully expecting agencies to report partial years in NFIRS and partial years in NERIS. The server will be decommissioned at the end of this year, and January 1st of next year, only NERIS reporting will be accepted by FEMA. This is the development timeline here at ImageTrend. So we just reached a giant milestone, and we've completed our integration for the NERIS core data sets, which are incident and entity, and we've completed the work to create our form manager, and we have done the work for our NERIS API. All of those items have opened up the doors so that we can get our other platform integrations working. And what I mean by that is the other integrations at ImageTrend. So for example, our reporting and intelligence team, our license management team, our Slate scheduling product team, our CAD team are all able to start working now. We're going to be adding additional functionality. And then when NERIS finalizes their secondary data sets, which are the incident analysis, community risk reduction, and health and wellness, we'll begin working on those. But the key point here is we can concurrently work on all of this functionality now that the integration for the core data sets has been completed. What does all of this mean for fire agencies? So there is going to be some configuration required, there will be some training required, and there will be a time commitment. So who is responsible for the configuration changes? In most cases, it will be the system administrators for the sites. So they will set up the new run forms, and they will take care of all that. And what kind of training will be needed for them? It all depends on what kind of experience they have right now and how much configuration that they have done. So the experienced admins that are in and making changes on a regular basis will need very little training. Maybe some folks that went with the set it, forget it approach many years ago might need some additional training to get up to speed on making these changes. And the time commitment, again, is all going to revolve around how configured your site is. Also, for the providers and our firefighters and our users of the software, there will be a minimal training that will be needed for them. The experience for the run form will be the same. We'll still have our sections, our panels, and our fields. But what they will select from those fields will be slightly different as the NERIS standard has changed. And you'll get to see that a little bit later in the presentation. So as far as implementation goes and when we'll be transitioning people, as I mentioned in Q1, we're finishing up the core data sets, which has been done. We're working on our transition documentation and getting that available. Starting in Q2, we will begin transitioning the NERIS beta agencies, and we will start the transition for our 12 state repository states. In Q3, we will start transitioning for clients based on the NERIS FEMA region onboarding schedule, and that effort will continue into Q4 as well. What does a transition to NERIS look like? So we'll have to add the new entity fields, which is a medium effort to a small effort. So today we can start gathering that information based on a list that I'll provide later in the presentation. We'll update a few configuration settings, which will be a low effort. We'll have to create and or edit the new deploy form, which includes the validation rules, the visibility rules, supplemental questions, worksheets, and preset values. This could be a large effort for agencies that want a lot of local customization, or it could be a low effort for agencies that have used our deploy run form in the past. We'll recreate the reports in Report Writer as all of the fields have changed, going from NFIRS to NERIS. So That could be a medium to large effort, depending on how many reports the agencies are using. And then we'll create our new print reports if folks are using those. So when can my agency transition to NERIS? So system admins will be able to start configuration updates in Q2. So that means you'll be able to start configuring your run form and making it into the vision that you have to support the workflows that your providers and your firefighters are using. Agency must be onboarded by NERIS before the complete transition can be completed where we're transmitting data. ImageTrend will transition the NERIS beta agencies starting in Q2, and ImageTrend will follow the NERIS FEMA region rollout schedule. What kind of training will be available for ImageTrend clients? So available in Q1, when you go into university, you will see a new button. It's over on the right-hand side right now, but it's a NERIS transition button. That is not live yet. It will be live a little bit later, but within that area, you'll be able to see step-by-step guides in university, recorded videos, and we'll continue to have live monthly webinars, and we may decide to have them more than monthly depending on the demand. So if you want to see what kind of things might be included in that NERIS transition area of Elite University, you can go and look at the NEMSIS 3.5 transition area, and we'll have very similar documentation as we had for the NEMSIS 3.5 transition. Currently, we did already start some of these articles, and they're available. The ones that are already completed are linked in the new articles and video section in University currently. So let's give a quick overview of Elite. I know that there's a lot of people that are on this call that are not currently Elite users. So I thought that we should just give a quick overview of the data entry of Elite and what makes it so powerful. So first of all, this is our run form. We have sections, panels, and fields, all of which are customizable and configurable. You can put them in any order you want. You can have as many as you want. You can relabel them if you want. We also have many different kinds of fields. So depending on the data that you're collecting, you'll see drop-down boxes or buttons. And you may be able to choose multiple buttons or maybe only a single button. It depends on the data that you are collecting. We also have a very powerful validation engine, which allows you to lead your users through the data entry experience and make sure that they're entering the required data and make sure that we are also entering data that is valid. So for example, we can do some checking on dates to make sure the dates make sense, or a date range or a time range, or we can check the fields based on that. Anytime that there is something that is not meeting our validation requirements, you'll get an exclamation point. And at that time, you can hover over that exclamation point and it will tell you why that exclamation point has been showing. And also we have a button down at the bottom. Right now it says 85% or 85 score. You can click on that button and it'll give you a list of all the reasons that you're not at 100%. We also have a visibility engine, which allows you to hide all the things that you don't need to see based on the data that's been entered so far. So for example, nobody wants to look at a questionnaire that's got 1,000 questions on it when maybe you only need to fill out 10 of those questions. So we hide all the things that are not valid at this point, and as soon as some criteria is met that will trigger the visibility, we'll show those fields. So for example, right here, if I click on this button, you'll see that that opens different sections and panels over on the left-hand side, and it also opens additional questions as well. We also have a concept of favorites. So anytime you see a drop-down menu, we can put the favorites at the top, and you can decide as an administrator what those favorites should be. We also have +1 codes. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but we will continue to have +1 codes with NERIS, and that allows you as an agency to collect data that is more granular than FEMA is looking for. So if FEMA only has a selection for one type of item, you can make that much more granular to capture the level of data that you want to collect. We also have the ability to put in hyperlinks. So maybe there's, in this case, it is for electric vehicles, and you want to see what the response methods should be, and you want to make sure that you're looking at the latest and greatest information, you can click on one of those hyperlinks and we'll actually bring you out to that website so you can get the most accurate and up-to-date information. And we also have preset values, one of my favorite features. So those of you that know the power of preset values, you'll want to definitely continue to use those within the NERIS run form. And those of you that aren't using it, it definitely would be a good time to start using them, because we all know in the fire world, we go to a lot of different incidents, but I would say 95% of those incidents fall within a small category, small set of incident types. So especially for the very common ones, you can set up preset values that will walk the providers and the firefighters and users through a lot of these commonly used items, and it will reduce the amount of time it takes them to document these incidents, and it will eliminate the repetitive clicks. So here is an example. In this case, we'll choose this preset value type, which is a motor vehicle crash with injuries. So when I click that button, it will fill in all of these values into the different fields that could be on multiple sections and panels. And as soon as I do that, our visibility engine pops up another question. Did this traffic crash require extrication? And in the case that the user chooses yes, it's going to bring up another question asking which kind of tools did you use if you use tools. And second of all, it's going to state that another preset value button will appear stating that you've used the wrong incident type. So instead of using a 322, which is a traffic accident with no injuries, we are going to change that to an incident type of a 352, which is extrication required. So now I can click on that new preset value button, and it will apply these new values. And when I choose a tool type, it can also pop up with the visibility engine the times that the extrication tools were used. Very powerful, a big time saver, one of my favorite features in the software, and it is definitely something that will be very valuable to folks as they're transitioning to NERIS. So for example, if you're already using preset value buttons, when we transition over to NERIS, you can label the button the same thing and just have it fill out the new NERIS values. All right, let's take a sneak peek at some of the new fields that we'll be seeing within a NERIS. So first of all, as I mentioned, the things that we've completed so far are the core data set. So we've completed the entity data set and we've completed the incident data set. So the entity data set is a new concept for fire, and it is information about your agency. So the entity data is in a couple different places, but under agency information and the details tab, we've relabeled the field, which used to be FDID, to the NFIRS FDID. And we've added the new fields, which is NERIS ID, NERIS reporting name, email, website, telephone. So one thing that I think we've all learned here recently, I think that everybody just assumed FDID was a number that was similar to a social security number for your agency, and it was unique across the entire nation. Well, NERIS has pointed out that that number actually was only unique for each state. So that is the reason that when the transition to NERIS happens, NERIS will be assigning all agencies a new NERIS ID, which is unique across the entire country. Now, with that said, if you're using other solutions out there and you're linking your data to other data entities and sharing your data, you'll still be able to link your NERIS FDID to your NERIS ID. So you can have all of that mapped so that other companies that you're working with will know who you are, and it will be all okay. So we also created an entire new NERIS tab under agency information. And that is really broken up into 3 different areas. So it is address station information, staffing information, and dispatch information. So here is the information for the physical address, the mailing address, and the fire stations. Forgive our formatting on this. This will be fixed before it's a final product. What we're seeing here is a little bit of a sneak preview. But this is the information about your staffing. So how many staff you have of each different type of staff. And then this is the information about your dispatch. We also have added some new fields into the agency location information, so a new nearest station ID and nearest station staffing. And for supporting agency information, we'll also have the NFIRS FDID has been relabeled, and we'll have the nearest ID. And then for vehicles, we will also have the unit nearest ID and the nearest unit staffing. All right, so what does it look like on the data entry side? So we have here our mega menu, and we'll have a module switch whether ImageTrend can turn on NERIS, yes or no, and there will be some point during the transition we'll have NFIRS and NERIS turned on. But when NERIS is turned on, you will see some new buttons. So we'll have the ability to enter NERIS fire incidents, and we'll have the different forms available. And when we go into one of these forms, you'll see it has the same look and feel. So we'll have the continuity of data entry. So we still have our sections, our panels, our fields. We'll still have the ability to search in the upper box, upper left-hand side for any field that is active on our form. We'll still have the ability in our drop-down menus to search, and we can click on the hamburger menu and search over on the left-hand side if that's easier. We'll still have the ability to search ascending or descending. So we'll still, again, have the continuity of data entry. For those folks that have access to, well, for system administrators, or in some cases, agency administrators that have access to the form manager, you'll see it has the same exact look and feel. So form manager is the same. And then for system administrators that have access to the dataset manager, I just wanted to point out that we will still have +1 codes. So as we're not using numeric entries anymore, it's not exactly entering a number, but we're able to add more granular fields if you want to do that. So for example, under a location use type, NERIS has only got a selection for open water. And in many cases, we would want to get more granular than that. In my example here, I just made lake, ocean, pond, or river. In your community or your agency, of course, you could actually name the lakes, you could name the rivers if you wanted to get that level of granularity in your data. So again, I just wanted to point out that the nearest data entry will remain the same. So we'll have continuity of data entry. We'll still have sections, we'll still have panels, we'll still have fields, all of which will be configurable, customizable. You can put them in whatever order you want. You can label them however you want. We'll still have the same great features for validation, visibility, favorites, search capabilities, and our preset values. So a big question is, what can you do today to prepare for this transition? So things that you can start working on today are broken into 3 categories. So first part is data validation. So you should verify your users list within Elite and make sure that people that are no longer there are inactive, and make sure that the information is correct for your current active users. And you should do the same thing with your vehicles and your agency locations. We don't have the ability to do it in our software yet, but at some point you'll have to select what is your headquarters. And if you're an agency that only has 1 station, that probably would be the headquarter, but maybe the headquarter would be City Hall or something like that. The kind of detailed information that NERIS will be looking for includes the unit information, the station addresses, your minimum staffing, and other department attributes like ISO rating and accreditation status. Another thing that we can start doing today is review our current usage. So creating a list of reports that you're currently using, create lists of currently used supplemental questions, and any agency-specific validation and visibility rules that you are using. And then there's, of course, in the fire world, what we all love, other duties as assigned. So 1 person from each agency will have to be established as the primary NERIS point of contact, as I mentioned earlier in the NERIS onboarding section. And if you're able and you have access to it, you should obtain boundary and response areas in a GIS layer. And that is something that NERIS is requiring. Both the items in the blue category under other duties as assigned will be things that you'll be working with NERIS on, but I thought I would add them to our slide so you had it all in one place. So some of the key takeaways for NERIS that I think are very important for us to know. So number 1, This came from Craig Weinshank, the director of research for FSRI, that is the lead developer and leading the charge on NERIS. There is no finish line. NERIS is going to continue to evolve and develop. And this is a slide that they have shared with me. And you can see here, look at what's happening in November 2025. Version 2 will be deployed. So that is something that is very exciting, and we have not been used to living in the world of NFIRS for many, many years. All right, so what kind of questions that I know are going to come up? So is there a cost to transition to NERIS? So ImageTrend is not charging for a transition to NERIS. There will be optional education and implementation services available for a charge if that's something that you want to participate in. Will ImageTrend support +1 codes with NERIS? I've already pointed that out. Yes, we will. And will ImageTrend support custom fields with NERIS? Yes, we will do that as well. Will there be continuity and reporting between NFIRS and NERIS? ImageTrend will provide continuity and reporting where that is available. So NFIRS and NERIS, it's a complete switchover. Every single field has changed. So there, and the tricky part is there's not a one-to-one. So I think in NFIRS we went from roughly 800 fields to NERIS with roughly 300 fields, although some of the seemingly 500 missing fields are represented in NERIS in one way, shape, or form. Sometimes some of the fields have been combined, so on and so forth. So currently, NERIS is working with CPSE, which is an accreditation organization, and they're working on a crosswalk which will cover the metrics that CPSE uses for accreditation. So ImageTrend will follow that guideline as a first step, and we will add other crosswalks as we can. So the other two questions are really questions that have come up a lot with the state fire marshal's offices. Is it possible for agencies to report to states? Absolutely. In most cases, states will require agencies to report directly to the state, and of course ImageTrend will allow for that. And will it be possible for states to retrieve direct entry data from NERIS? And that will also be possible as well. So how do you keep up with the NERIS updates? So here's a few places that you can keep up. On the NERIS website, there are NERIS notifications, so you can click on that link to stay informed with NERIS directly. You can join our monthly client connection calls, so you can click on that link to go and sign up for those. You can visit our website at that particular URL is where we're keeping our NERIS updates. And we also have a blog that we're updating on a regular basis, so you can sign up for that as well. And then I just want to point out, again, the NERIS education packages will be offered to ImageTrend customers for an additional fee. It's two-hour webinars that will guide you through the essential steps for transitioning your department from NFIRS to NERIS. And you can sign up today by responding to the poll at the end of this webinar. So at this point, I know that Tammy has been behind the scenes answering as many questions as she could, but we'll have a lot of time now to answer some of these questions live. So Tammy, I'm going to let you go ahead and ask me some questions.
Hi, Troy. Could you please address the availability of NERIS in Data Mart, Report Writer, and Continuum?
Yes, so that is one of the things that we're currently working on. So we are completing a new Data Mart that will have all the NERIS fields, and that will link to Continuum, and that will link to Report Writer. Did that answer the question, Tammy? I think it did.
Mostly, but do you have a timeline on that?
The timeline on that, well, yes, the timeline on that is the work has just started right now. So we are fully anticipating that that will be available during the second quarter, possibly towards the end of it. And we totally understand that that will be a requirement for agencies to do the transition to the full transition to NERIS.
And while you're talking reporting, could you address canned reports and the NFPA annual report that's currently available as a canned report? Will those still be available?
So our plan is to transition many of the canned reports. We have been asking for feedback from the market, which are the most used reports, and we will make sure that we can at least get those moved over and recreated. So the report writing team has been looking at our current report writer data and coming up with a way that they can programmatically transition those reports over. But some reports that have some certain types of criteria in them are going to have to be recreated. I feel like what else do we have to say about that, Tammy? You and I have talked a lot about this topic.
Yeah, I think you pretty well covered it. We're going to do as best we can to provide what's currently available today, but we will need some guidance from clients to prioritize some of those reports. So we welcome your feedback on that.
And one thing to point out too is that one of the things that NERIS is planning on doing is some of those annual reports, they're planning on having that built right into their side of things as well, where it could automatically generate some of those items if you're sending your data to NERIS. It's one of the carrots that they're offering to make sure that there's a vested interest for agencies to transmit their data to NERIS through their RMS vendor.
All right. Could you also talk about the CAD integration, when that might be available? There are a few different CAD questions, so I'm just going to spit them all out so you can kind of hit them all at one time. Will there be a cost for the new CAD mapping with NERIS? And when do we expect to have CAD mapping or CAD integration available?
Yep, so we've been talking to the CAD team throughout this entire process of developing the incident data set, but they haven't really been able to start exactly until literally within the last couple of weeks here. So we're just getting started with the CAD team. We have, I don't know the exact number, but there's about 250 different CAD integrations that we currently have, and every single one of them will have to be touched. So as we're working through the NERIS beta agencies, those will be the first CAD agency, the first CAD integrations that we do rework, and then we'll follow up with the other ones as they come up. So it is going to be a slight bottleneck for the CAD integrations, but it won't be too bad. Once we get a few of them under our belt, the rest will happen fairly quickly and fairly easily. And we are not charging for the CAD changeover from NFIRS to NERIS.
Thank you. Could you also talk about the timing of the NERIS transition? There's been a lot of questions of, I'm a NERIS beta tester, but how do I access the NERIS beta test? And that seems very specific to the NERIS UI, not ImageTrends. So there's a lot of confusion about when can the beta testers onboard with NERIS, and with the FEMA regions, because one slide indicated that metro departments would go at one time, but then there was by FEMA region. Do you have any clarity on what that might actually look like? Or
Yep. I'm going to start answering this question. I'm probably going to have you circle back because that was a lot. I think
was a lot.
5 questions in one question. So first of all, I noticed this as well with a lot of the questions that were coming in on the NERIS webinar yesterday. There's definitely a lot of confusion about what onboarding needs and what a transition means. So for most people, and I would say like 99.9% of all agencies that are out there, they're never actually going to really log into the NERIS site, and they're not going to be working directly on the NERIS site. They're going to continue to work through their RMS vendor, and the RMS vendor will send all the data over to NERIS on their behalf. That is the way it's going to work for almost everybody. There are a handful of agencies that are out there that currently are direct entering their data on the NFIRS direct entry tool, and some of those probably will continue to direct enter their data with the NERIS direct entry tool. That is a very small portion of folks that are out there, and it's probably nobody that's on this call, because I'm assuming that everybody's on this call is using an RMS vendor or is interested in one. So that answers that part. The second part is, once you are onboarded with NERIS, then through your RMS vendor, you can start doing the transition work, and you could start transmitting your data once the RMS vendor is done and once you are done configuring your site to the way that you need it to be configured. Did I answer the whole question, Tammy, or is there more parts to it?
I feel like that. It's just very confusing, some of the slides that NERIS provided us on what the actual rollout from the NERIS side looks like.
Right. So there's like 10,000 or more agencies that need to be transitioned from now until the end of the year. And yeah, it is. If you look at December, it's 5,000 agencies they're planning on onboarding in December for go live on January 1st. Now the good news is that's when you'll be onboarded with NERIS. Now that doesn't mean that you can't start doing some of the things to get ready before that. You will have access, or when I say you will, system administrators will have access earlier than the NERIS rollout schedule to start doing the work to make sure that your site is ready to go, configuring your run forms, configuring your reports, and all of those items will be available to you well before the actual NERIS FEMA rollout schedule. Does that help, do you think, Tammy?
I think so.
Okay.
And then related to that is when you onboard with NERIS, will we be able to import data from the NERIS entity fields, or will they have to manually enter that into Elite after they have onboarded with NERIS?
Yep, that's a great question. So originally NERIS was stating that everybody as part of the onboarding process was going to have to, every single agency was going to have to log into NERIS, create their node, and enter all the entity information. And after the meeting with all the state fire marshal offices a few weeks ago, I believe that NERIS has changed their stance on that, and they will be working with the state fire marshals to try to get their list that we all know is pretty good and use that to transmit it over to NERIS. So we're still working out the details on that. I've talked to at least 5 different state fire marshal offices that would like to go that route because they are confident that the data that they have on the agencies is good, and they would like to start with that. So we are working through the details with NERIS on that because we don't want anybody to have to double enter that data.
Agreed. Could you also talk a little bit about the EMS to fire workflow? There's been several questions about how is NERIS going to affect that in Elite.
Yep, so that will definitely be, that's definitely on our list of work that we need to do in the short term here because anybody that is a rescue site, that's a very hot topic for them, and it's something that will be mandatory before they go live. So again, every single field has changed from NERIS from NFIRS, so we will have to redo the work to do that job, but we will have that and it will be available this year, early parts of the year, so that we can make sure that's available as agencies go to transition.
And then I also saw several questions about the transition timing. Do we as a client need to transition ahead of 2026? Can we go early? Can we wait? Do you have any information on that timeline?
Yep. So, you know, it's interesting. Both with NFIRS and with NERIS, there's no stick, let's say, to force you to send your data to NERIS. There is only carrot. So the carrot is grant funding that could be available. They're gonna, you know, so they're politely requesting everybody send their data to NERIS. So if you decide that you didn't want to transition until March 1st, 2026, or you know, whatever, 2026, you can of course do that. That is completely up to you. If you want to transition on January 1st, 2026, that is also up to you. And again, if you think about the way the data is getting sent to NFIRS today, it's so unwieldy and manual that a lot of people are doing it on a monthly basis anyway. So, you know, for the really large agencies that do 1,000 runs a day, in a lot of cases, they can't even transmit a file to NFIRS that's got more than 2 days worth of data. So those are some of the reasons that make people wait longer to submit their data. And the fact that we'll be able to have an API and send it automatically As soon as you're ready, we can go back and send that data. We can say that, okay, if your incident is 100% validation, the status is completed, and it is more than 3 days old, submit it. So once we're ready to go, we can turn that on, and it will just submit all that data, even if it is slightly older. Now, of course, we're talking about NERIS data, not NFIRS data. So I guess my point is you can transition when it's right for you. Going early, I'm not going to say it's impossible to go earlier than the FEMA schedule. It will be depending upon whether NERIS will onboard you earlier than the FEMA schedule. That is not something that ImageTrend will be controlling. So I'm told it won't be impossible, but they're going to try to stick to that schedule as much as they can, just so that they can make sure that they have the resources to transition all of the agencies that need to be done during the different months that they're choosing. But Tammy, did I answer that?
I think so.
Okay.
And Troy, could you just clarify and talk about that in this transition from NFIRS to NERIS, all of the functionality that is currently in Elite will still be available, like visibility, validation, all of the things. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So every single thing that exists in Elite today in Elite Fire will be moving over to the NERIS Fire. We're going to be doing some of those on a phased basis, just based on the incredibly tight timeline that we've been handed. But we have determined which features are mandatory for people to go to transition. And it's exactly like we've already heard questions about: validation rules, visibility rules, supplemental questions, data mart and reporting, EMS to fire workflow. All of those things we know are mandatory to move over. Some other things like maybe fire CQI, that can come a little bit later because we can't get everything done on the best time frame. But every single feature that exists in Elite Fire today will be transitioning over to NERIS Fire. In addition, we're going to add some new functionality that has been asked for quite a while, but we couldn't fit it into the roadmap until now because we had to rewrite everything anyways. So there are some surprises that are going to be coming that everybody will be very excited about.
Awesome. Could you also talk about the timeline of when incidents get sent to NERIS? There's been a few questions of how that will be handled. Is it still manual? Will it be via API? And when does the incident actually get sent?
Yep. So the data will get sent, and it will be automatically. It will not be manual. It will happen via API, and it will be highly configurable by the agencies. So Tammy, I'm going to let you, as somebody that used to be in implementation, talk about all the different options on how we can have settings for when these incidents go. I know I kind of mentioned it earlier about validation, score, and timing, and a certain status, but maybe you can talk about some of the other options that would be available.
Sure. So just like with if you're an EMS client as well as a fire client, you're used to your EMS incidents automatically exporting to your state. NERIS will have that same capability. So you will decide which criteria needs to be met to send that data. If you want a minimum validation score, if you want it in a certain incident status or a combination of a variety of things, you as the client will determine when that incident is ready to go. And you also will still need to follow your state's guidance on your fire incidents. I know with NFIRS especially, some states require the data to go to the state first, and then the state gets it on to NERIS, and then others will have you submit that directly to NERIS. So that will depend on your state's requirements as well as your own preference for your local department.
And I saw all the clapping and the celebration happening, and that is exactly how I feel. This is definitely one of the greatest parts about NERIS, is being able to automatically transmit this data, which ImageTrend's an expert at doing. We've been doing that for years and years and years on the EMS side of things. We are ready to do it on the fire side as well.
All right, I saw another question and now I've lost it. Everybody's putting so many questions in. So I'm just going to go ahead and give you all a heads up. There are so many questions coming. My fingers cannot keep up in the chat. So we will follow up via email to any questions directly after the webinar has ended. So Troy, would you also talk about for those that will be attending Connect, or maybe if they're not, they might want to decide what we will have available at Connect for NERIS?
Yeah, so we're definitely going to have some sessions on NERIS. We'll definitely have a booth where you can come over and talk to not only people like myself in the product role. We'll also have developers there as well. So if you want to pick your brain, pick the brain of developers as well, we can do that also. So definitely NERIS will be a hot topic at Connect this year.
Thank you, Troy.
Actually, Tammy, you're leading a class. What class are you leading?
I have two sessions actually. One is, I forgot the exact titles, but one we will cover some of the major changes between NFIRS and NERIS, and the other will be some steps that you'll need to take with AnyLead to get your site ready to go live with NERIS. So, all right. Angel, I know you have also been monitoring the chat. If you see anything that you feel like we want to bring up right now that I'm overlooking, please feel free to ask those as well.
So I see a question in the chat here about are we going to be able to do test NERIS in a demo department? So absolutely, you'll be able to set up a demo agency and you'll be able to do testing, which will allow you to not only have your users do some testing to help you refine your run form and your data entry points, but it will also allow you to do any documentation that you want to do above and beyond what we provide. Sorry, Angel, I cut you off.
Oh, no, that's fine, Troy. No, thanks for jumping in and seeing that question. I was just going to say, as Tammy mentioned, there's so many questions coming in. It's hard to follow all of them as they come. So if we do not get to your question, we will follow up via email. This also gives us an opportunity to update our FAQs as some of these questions are phenomenal. We do have a page on our site dedicated to NERIS updates, which we will add a lot of these questions to as well.
And Angel, one of the things I was going to bring up that ties in with that is there were a couple of questions on, is it possible to make the ImageTrend NERIS timeline publicly available to our clients? So if that's something we could share there, that would be amazing.
Absolutely, yeah. We can add everything to that NERIS updates site, so everything is in one spot for our customers.
And Troy, you may have addressed this, but I think another big question is when can clients start touching NERIS AnyLead so they can begin testing and building things out in their demo agency?
Yep. Well, we've had a list of NERIS beta agencies for quite a while now, but we haven't really had anything that they could see, touch, or feel just yet. So we'll finally, after the next release, going to be able to reach out to some of those folks and allow them to get their hands on it and start doing their run forms and such. So we'll be working with the NERIS beta agencies and our state repository sites first, and then we'll open it up very shortly after that. It would probably be the very next release after that to other agencies so they can start configuring run forms and things like that.
Any chance we could make the slide deck available to attendees? That's a question.
Guess I'll have to, that's an Angel question. I think so. I mean, the recording will be available, right?
Yes, the recording is shared when it is on demand via email. And we can share the slide deck as well, since it'll be part of the recording.
And Troy, so I think just because of timing, this will probably be our last question. Could you address clients that are currently on a state site, a state elite site, and how those transitions will be handled? Do they need to wait for their state? Will everyone do, what might that look like?
Yep, so that's a really good question. So we've reached out to our state clients to talk about their transition plan. And in most cases, yes, if you're on the state site, you would be waiting for your state to transition because in most of our state clients, the site administrator at the state level is the one that's controlling the run form. So yes, you would be waiting for the state to transition.
Thank you, Troy.
All right, thank you.
Perfect. So I just want to come back on as we're reaching the end of our webinar to say thank you all for attending today. Thank you for all the amazing questions. It's really exciting to see all of the engagement, and hopefully we could answer all of your questions. If we did not, we will send a follow-up email. For those of you that are new to ImageTrend, we are the #1 choice for EMS software and the leading provider of emergency response solutions, from data collection to analytics and more for fire, EMS, and hospitals. If you're interested in learning more, I invite you to please fill out the poll that you'll see on your screen. I also want to reiterate what Troy mentioned earlier, that we are offering a NERIS education package for our customers at an additional cost. This package does include 2 2-hour webinars that will help you transition from NFIRS to NERIS. Again, if you're interested, please fill out the form that you see on your screen. While you're doing that, I want to thank Troy and Tammy, of course, for presenting today. The knowledge and information you shared is very helpful and valuable. As a reminder, the webinar is recorded. You will receive a copy on demand version in the next couple of days. If you're interested in attending more webinars like this, please visit our website at imagetrend.com/events. Thank you again for attending today, and we wish you a great rest of your day.